Grab a cup of tea or listen as you go, ladies. This is your hour with Dr. Zoe, your life and relationship coach. With encouragement, on-point insight, inspiring guests, health tips, and advice, Dr. Zoe helps busy women keep their mind in the game by redefining your superwoman. You're listening to The Dr. Zoe Show.
Hey, welcome to The Dr. Zoe Show, Redefining Your Superwoman. I'm your host, Dr. Zoe. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist with a doctorate in clinical psychology. I'm a life and relationship coach and a motivational speaker, and I can work with you virtually to help you get unstuck. My passion is helping women find their superpower, learn to embrace it, and share it with the world. Connect with me by texting the word JOIN to 38470 or go to my website at drzoeshaw.com. The show topic today is what to do when the Me Too movement triggers your Me Too memory. We'll talk about that in just a second. First up, Superwoman win. So I harnessed my inner warrior and I haggled at the dealership buying a car for my son this week. It's a win for me because I don't like to haggle. Just tell me the price and I'll pay for it. I've always had a hard time haggling, probably because I've hated it when other people have tried to offer me less than what I've said I am or something that I'm offering is worth. And I don't like that feeling. And I've also kind of felt that maybe I don't have a good sense of the value of something. So I probably just didn't trust myself in this area. But I had to separate those feelings with the truth of what car salesmen and dealerships do. Historically, I've probably been the dream come true for car salesmen. But this time I was armed with my research and my calculator, and I went in for a fight. And maybe it was because it was a car for my son instead of a car for myself. So maybe I wasn't quite as invested in it. But either way, it was a really good exercise in stretching myself. And I fought and I haggled. And I was so pleasantly surprised when the dude actually started coming down. He started giving in. So it felt pretty darn great and powerful. And that's my Superwoman win for the week. My Superwoman fail, this might sound trivial, but I'm having trouble with my houseplants. I love houseplants. I love bringing, the outside in. I love the fact that they clean our air, but I'm just not that great at keeping the poor things alive. And it's pretty frustrating because instead of accepting that I don't have the greenest indoor thumb, I do have a pretty good green outdoor thumb. I've enjoyed having seasonal vegetable gardens from time to time. I think I missed last season. But inside, instead of accepting my limitations, I keep trying, and I've killed a number of really beautiful, lovely greenery. So I'm realizing that I'm down to, I think, just maybe 1 or 2 houseplants. It also doesn't help that my dogs have destroyed some of the houseplants too. But it's time to start again. So I'm going to cross my fingers that some of them will last. And I do realize that that is the definition of insanity, but oh well, there's my fail. I'm going to be getting some new houseplants. So for today's topic, what to do when the Me Too movement triggers your Me Too memory or event. It is impossible right now to avoid hearing about other women's experiences with sexual harassment and assault. What really started with celebrities speaking up about their experiences has now spread to every woman everywhere. The goal of the Me Too movement was to bring light to the magnitude of the issue, and it's pretty amazing what one hashtag can do. And this issue has definitely been brought to the light, which is a good thing. I had someone recently say to me, though, that all women have been sexually harassed or assaulted in some way. It's just part of being a woman. I'll let that one sit with you for a moment. I know whenever we use the word all or always, it's rarely true. But if this is even close to the truth, then this episode is for every woman. So what do you do when the Me Too movement triggers memories or issues with an event or events that happened in your life? My purpose and my point today is to address what this movement might be doing to you and how it may be affecting you from an emotional, psychological standpoint. So I wanted to speak about this today because what I know and what I've come to realize is that my therapy practice has a little pulse on the emotional world. I get to see all of the emotional trends created by things going on in this country and really in the world in general. Events like the Vegas shooting, Trump's election, now the Kavanaugh hearings, all of these events bring up emotions that affect not just us, but also our relationships. And I've noticed in my practice an increase in marital discord during the presidential election. So literally, marriages were in such upheaval. And I don't know if it was because of the presidential, well, I know that had something to do with it, the presidential campaign, but I don't know if it was the whole male, female, Hillary. It was just a lot of stuff. But I noticed an increase in marital discord. There was also an increase in anxiety surrounding the Vegas shooting, especially for my clients because of our close proximity to Vegas. And many of my clients either personally witnessed the event or had close friends and family members who were there or even lost lives. And now with this Me Too movement, I have a number of women who are speaking up, sometimes for the very first time, about their trauma surrounding sexual assault. And so if I generalize just from my small sample of women in my practice, I know that this is going on everywhere. This remembering and this speaking up, it can be super empowering. And sometimes it can also make you feel like you're unraveling at the same time. So here is what you can do and some helpful tips if you're feeling any of this right now. And this is exactly why I wanted to talk about it. So pay attention to how you feel. Sometimes you might be really surprised by how strongly something that you've maybe buried super deep, or even something that you might have forgotten about, how it can affect you now. Be aware of what you're feeling in your mind and your body. You might have a racing heart. You might have agitation, muscle tightness. You might feel sadness, fear, anger. You might have nightmares, or maybe you're just super irritable. All of these things can feel slightly disruptive right now, or they can feel like, there's a total upheaval. And maybe you haven't even noticed until now, and you find yourself listening to this podcast and wondering, like, oh, maybe my increased irritability could be about my past or be about this whole climate. And maybe it is affecting me. Sometimes hearing how some women aren't believed can trigger your fear that maybe no one would or did or could believe your story. So I want you to feel all of this, and I want you to recognize that nothing is bad about any of your feelings. Get rid of all the shoulds here. It doesn't matter if it's been 40 years or 2 months since your trauma. Your feelings are okay. And so participate in this Me Too movement if it feels empowering to you. But if it doesn't, don't. There's no pressure, and there shouldn't be. Jumping on a bandwagon just because it's there is not necessarily useful. So I'm telling you now, don't rush to share your story on social media. If it feels empowering and healthy, then by all means, share it. If you haven't shared your story anywhere else, though, or with anyone else, social media probably isn't the place to start. I say start small. Share it with a friend. Share it with a therapist. Talk, share your story. It's good for you. You need to do it, but start small. And before you do share it on social, first ask yourself, what do I want to accomplish by this? Evaluate whether sharing it actually has the possibility of accomplishing that thing that you have figured out. So you got to figure it out. What do I want to accomplish by sharing this thing on social media? Sometimes you really just want to be witnessed. You might be looking for some reassurance or validation from others, and this is not a bad thing. We humans seek witnessing from others all the time, and it's really how we connect as humans. We want to have our lives validated and witnessed. Whatever your reason is for sharing, acknowledge it and examine it, but don't rush. Create your post, like whatever you're going to post out there, create it and wait. And then see if you still feel the same way tomorrow or the next. And if you do, press send, girl, just press it. But if you don't, just make sure you're not doing it hastily because you can't get it back. And don't judge. You don't want to be judged. You want to be witnessed. And everyone's process is different. So don't judge that woman who is writing out her whole experience and sharing it on social. And don't judge the woman who keeps quiet and doesn't share anything and doesn't speak up. Both of these can be healthy and valid ways of dealing and processing with your trauma. So instead of judging, support and be a witness to someone else. If you don't want to be witnessed, be a witness. But if you don't feel like witnessing, and that's okay too, then you got to stop the exposure. So if you're continually being triggered, you've got to stop the exposure. You have to protect yourself. No one else is going to stop it. No one else knows what you're feeling inside. And so you've got to take control. You've got to take over, and you've got to make sure that you are protecting your mind, your spirit, your emotions, and your body. And it's hard. In this climate, it's hard and impossible probably to keep everything out. We can't live in a total bubble, but you certainly can take a media break. You can take all kinds of breaks. You can remove yourself from conversations. You can change the topic. You've got to give yourself some brain space if you recognize that you're feeling overwhelmed and triggered by this movement, by a lot of the things that are being said and talked about. And it's important to recognize how these things are affecting you, because some people will just continue along, getting beaten up by the exposure, not realizing the effect that it's having. So step away for a minute and breathe. It's also so very important to recognize your lens and how it's affecting you. Many of my clients are feeling so bombarded with the media and some of their own past experiences with men that they end up feeling that all men are a certain way. And this is just not true. I'm going to say it again because so many women are using these words like all and they when it comes to men, and it's just not true. This kind of thinking that all men are a certain way destroys relationships on a personal level, and it can also undermine us as a society on a macro level. This is called, and I'm going to use these psychological terms, this is called frequency illusion. It's a cognitive bias that our mind creates. So our mind creates these shortcuts. It helps us not have to totally evaluate every single thing we see in the world. And so we have these shortcuts. And there's hundreds of cognitive biases that have been identified by psychologists, and this is just one of them. And so the frequency illusion is that because you're hearing something over and over and over again, you believe that it must be the case and you apply it to everything globally. And that is a bias and not true. When you believe that all men are dogs, your mind also creates something called a confirmation bias. And a confirmation bias is that you will see what you believe everywhere you go, and you will actually discount. So if you have this belief, you will discount the men who are not like you believe all men are. And that actually then strengthens your belief that all men are blank, 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 fill in whatever blank you want. The truth bomb, though, is that if you think all men are whatever, you can't have healthy relationships with men. And for moms, this includes your sons. This is a hard one to take, but it's so very important that you get it and you wrap your brain around this. And so there's an exercise that I have some of my female clients do when they are struggling with this idea that all men are. And I'm going to ask you to do this if you recognize that this is something that you might be struggling with. Get a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle of the paper, and I want you to first say the thing that you think all men are on the left-hand side. All men are whatever, and maybe it's a lot of things. And then what I want you to do is I want you to think back from your childhood. I want you to think back all the way through till present. I want you to write down the names of the men who you've come in contact with in your life, who, to the best of your knowledge, are not those things. I want you to write as many as you can come up with. And I did this with a client last week. She could come up with only 2 men. And I said, great. In your world, in your circle of the world, if there are 2 men that don't have these qualities, who aren't whatever in the world. I don't even remember what it was, cheaters or whatever it is she felt that all men were. If there are 2 men in your world that aren't, if you multiply that by the rest of the world, there are many. And so that means you can't say all are they. And those men are out there and they do exist. So that's an exercise that can be super helpful. Next, consider therapy. Sometimes we need help processing our trauma. And if you've had a traumatic event, seeking out help from a trained therapist can be so very beneficial. If you have had actual trauma, a really great therapy is EMDR. It's called eye motion desensitization reprocessing, and it is a therapy that is specific for trauma, and you can actually talk through your trauma and reprocess it so that your brain experiences it in a different way and you can move forward from it. Bottom line is, don't do this yourself. Get some help if you are struggling. So if you are a woman out there who is being triggered, just know it's natural to feel how you're feeling. You don't have to respond and do what everybody else is doing. You do you. But first you have to figure out what's going on with you so that you can do you. Seek help, and also know that despite everything you're hearing, despite everything you're seeing in men that maybe you thought were amazing men, and now you're hearing something different, they are not representative of all the men in the world. There are great, amazing, honorable, quality men that exist out there. And last, if you're struggling, seek some help. Next up is Real Talk. This is Real Talk, where I answer questions from my listeners and I share my own musings and encouragement. Please reach out if you have some questions that you'd like for me to address on the show. All the questions are anonymous, and I take your confidentiality seriously as if you were my own client. You can email me questions to zoe@drzoeshaw.com or connect with me on any of my social medias. So this question was curated from my column at thegritandgraceproject.org. You can always submit your questions there or directly to me. What a tough question. So here it is. How do my husband and I practically set boundaries with our parents who are each going through a separation or divorce? Both sets of our parents are going through a break in their marriage, and all 4 of them come to us to talk. It's affecting our mood, emotional eating, fitness level, family life with our kids and work, and it's constant. Holidays have been the absolute worst. How do we love them, even when we're angry with their decisions? How do we protect our family unit from the effects of the drama? I've resorted to literally miming the action of putting on sunglasses to block the drama when I feel overwhelmed. Wow. So first, that's great that you're miming the action of blocking out the drama, but guess what? This is real life and you can't mime it. You have to actually do it. You have to block out that drama. You have to do it for you. You have to do it for your family. And many parents of adults make the mistake of thinking that because their children are adults, that they don't have to adhere to that rule of bad-mouthing the other parent or using their kids as a sounding board during a divorce. But here's the reality. If you're a parent and you've got grown children, that rule goes for all ages, for all times. It's inappropriate for them or for you as a parent of adults to come to your children with your divorce drama. That's what your friends are for, and that's what your therapists are for. But here's the reality. You can't control your parents' behavior or what comes out of their mouth. So as their child, you should support them if they need your help. But that doesn't mean that you're obligated to expose yourself and your kids to their emotional mess. They're not thinking straight right now. And they probably don't even realize the emotional upheaval that they're causing in your life, which means that now it's your turn to be the grown-up. Your parents might be going through kind of an adolescent phase right now, and you have to be the grown-up. So I get the feeling that you kind of know this to some extent, but the hard part is, how do you take the action? How do you erect these healthy boundaries without hurting your parents' feelings, right? So first, you have to recognize that you have your own issues. You have your own anger that you're dealing with because your parents are divorcing. This is painful at any age, and it makes it worse when your spouse is going through the exact same thing, because it's hard for you two probably to support each other because you're both in this place of needing support. So each person grieves in their own way. And please understand that even your ideas of marriage can take a hit when your parents are divorcing. So it makes sense that this could be putting a little bit of a strain on your marriage. You didn't mention that, but I'm just letting you know. And right now, it's time. You're going to put on your warrior vest and you are going to take your marriage and your family back. You love your parents and you can keep all of your relationships by sitting down with your husband first and having a discussion. You two have to decide on your own boundaries with your parents, and this should include: one, you have to ask your parents, don't talk about the divorce when your kids are around, period. That needs to be a firm rule. You need to ask them to not badmouth the other parent ever. Tell them, hey, listen, this is my mom, this is my dad too, and you badmouthing them is not helping me. If you need help, you got to get help, but you can't badmouth them to me. It's also important to agree with your husband that family time is not to be interrupted or canceled because of your parents' drama. Their drama is going to happen, and that doesn't mean you guys have to stop, throw everything, and go attend to your parents. It's also good to set up regular date night for you and your husband, where you make a rule that discussion of your parents' drama is 100% off limits. You're going to just enjoy each other and not talk about their stuff. When it comes to the greater family, you need to make it known that whenever you have family events, that you'll always invite all parties. And those people can decide if they want to come or not, and they can deal with it when they arrive. And you can let them know if anyone is inappropriate or they can't respect your boundaries, they need to leave. It's also a good thing to maybe start creating a rotation for holidays. So if you're the one that visits, you can rotate who you go to and just set up a schedule every other year. You'll spend Christmas at every other parent's house. Or if you're going to do part of Christmas on one family, part of Christmas on the other, whatever it is, notify your parents of the rotation and stick to it, because that'll make it all a lot easier. So after you and your husband have come up with these boundaries, now you got to sit down with your parents and you got to tell them that you love them, that you want to support them, but because you love and care for them, all four of them together, their divorce is having a detrimental effect on your family, and you've got to protect your family first. So you got to lay out these boundaries with them. You letting them know that, yes, you also know that they love you too, and that they want the best for your family and your grandchildren, and that's why you know they're going to respect your boundaries. Now notice, I haven't included any conversations with your children on any of these discussions. This is not your children's divorce. And so you would be doing the best to keep them out of your parents' divorce to the greatest extent that you can. Ultimately, of course, they need to know whatever the facts are, that they're going to be getting divorced or that they are. It is a reality. Some things are going to change. But other than that, they should be shielded from, most of all of the drama and the details. You mentioned that your feelings of anger and judgment about your parents' choices are affecting you. So just like they need to take their issues somewhere else, this isn't the time for you to go to your parents and speak to them about your disappointment about their decisions. They are adults and they're making decisions for their reasons. And you're an adult and you need to process all of your feelings with someone else too. Maybe later you can. Maybe when this is all over, there's space for that discussion in your relationship with your parents, but now is just not the time. So remember, loving relationships include healthy boundaries. This is a difficult time in your relationship with your parents, but you guys can all get through this if you're willing to have the difficult conversations, if you're willing to demand respect for everyone throughout this process. Best of luck to you. So thanks for tuning into the Dr. Zoe Show. New shows go up on Tuesdays. Subscribe so you don't miss a show. If you're interested in coaching or therapy, or you just want to get a little more help, go to my website at drzoeshaw.com. Or you can go to any of my social medias at the handle Dr. Zoe Shaw. Join my free newsletter by texting the word JOIN to 38470. And I look forward to speaking with you wonderful ladies on social media throughout the week. Have a super week.
You've been listening to The Dr. Zoe Show, redefining your superwoman, with your host, Dr. Zoe Shaw. Don't forget to sign up for her monthly newsletters to get encouragement, tips, and skills for keeping your mind in the superwoman game. Connect with her now at www.drzoeshaw.com. Tell your friends and subscribe to her podcast on iTunes. Join us next time for another edition of The Dr. Zoe Show.